Wizards of the Coast just announced Dungeons and Dragons 1, they call it. I see a little bit of confusion on different forums. Some people say it might be Dungeons and Dragons 5.5. Other people are claiming that it might be the 6th edition. Whatever the case, I have seen some major changes. For example, they want a natural 20 to always be a success. So I guess now the level 1 rogue can actually kick the dragon and do damage. But one of the more bizarre rules seem to be that only players are going to crit. So enemies aren't going to crit, which is kind of a hint that the game is going to be made a lot more easy. Hopefully this is not the case, because I have played a couple of D&D campaigns. It's almost impossible to get a party wipe. And while that does seem like an interesting thing, removing difficulty from the game makes it less exciting. It removes a lot of tension. And people who have played a lot of tabletop games probably know what I'm talking about. Now, going on various forums, it seems that most of the community is very disappointed. Most of the corporate shills, the video game press, is very excited. Of course, they're basically saying that, oh, this is the same like when previous games were made, like when 5th edition came up. A lot of people were very pessimistic, but 5th edition ended up being very good, so... Yeah, but it's a little bit different, isn't it? Like, the thing with the 5th edition, when it was still made by people who genuinely love Dungeons and Dragons. If you go on Twitter and you follow some of the people that are making this game, they not only hate the game, but they hate the player base, and they hate geeks, and they hate geek culture, and you wonder what are they doing there to begin with? And the main problem, like, this is what I genuinely think is happening in a lot of these IPs, is that they have no more soul. This is like the emphasis, you know, they're so corporate, they're so manufactured, that it feels as if they don't have any more soul. Like, look at Warcraft 3, right? Like, Warcraft 3 created this very beautiful and rich world, very mythical and fantasy-like, where you have these dangerous forests that are filled with very beautiful night elves with big titties, but they're also incredibly vicious and violent, and you're definitely going to die if you go into those forests, because those night elves don't fuck around. And then you have World of Warcraft, like the latest expansion. What is it about? Collecting mounts, and you get like rainbow colored gear that doesn't look menacing or intimidating anymore in a game called Warcraft, you know? And I think this is going to happen with Dungeons and Dragons as well. Like, all of its soul is going to be removed. There's not going to be that much fantasy, because the people creating the game, they're not trying to create an immersive world to captivate the audience with great storytelling. No, they're trying to fix racismus. I mean, Joe Biden should actually put these people into government, because they have the solution to fix racism in America. I'm not kidding. Like, if you listen to their talk shows and their press statements, that's what they're trying to do. The Floyd riots didn't need to happen. Like, all they needed to do is wait a little bit for Dungeons and Dragons to come out. Because apparently they figured out that the reason people are racist in real life is because they play Dungeons and Dragons and the orcs are evil, so therefore. I'm not kidding, like, that's their argument, alright? And you would think that if what happens in a video game transcends in real life, they would have to deal with magic first, because it turns those damn kids into warlocks, scaring their religious parents as they start casting spells and shit. And then you also have the violence in the game. I mean, maybe that's why you had the riots in the United States, because people were playing Dungeons and Dragons at home, and they thought that it's okay to go out and do that violence, right? Like, isn't that a bigger problem? No, I'm not even kidding. Like, this is exactly what most of these developers are talking about on Twitter, social media, when they give interviews. Like, they want to fix the world, which comes at the expense of creating an interesting game. Like, take, for example, what they did, right? Like, the Dark Elves, they used to be an evil race. They take slaves, they enjoy torturing people. Like, they're nasty, nasty business. But there's this Dark Elf called Dritz van Oerden, and he's an exception. Like, he's actually a kind Dark Elf, and he's a hero to many people. And that creates an interesting story. It creates an interesting dynamic, especially wherever Dritz goes. He is being persecuted at first for being a Dark Elf, and then people figure out, oh, so he's actually different. But now he doesn't really matter as a character. Because, like, the Dark Elves, they're not evil. Like, the Dark Elves are complex. So, having a Dark Elf that is actually good, that's like, meh. Right? So, Drizzt Van Orden fans, suck it. You can suck it because he's not special anymore. And of course, Dungeon Masters can still homebrew their own campaign and they can still do whatever they've been doing up till now and still make interesting stories. But the question is, why is it that you have to struggle against the company? Why is it that it's kind of like a fight between the corporation and the consumer? Like, why can't the company and the consumer just work hand in hand? Why can't they work together in harmonious synergy while I give them my money and they give me good lore in return? Why do we have to have this conflict? So, my thoughts is that the new 6th edition is going to be even more simplified, more streamlined, more accessible, like they like to say. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with accessibility. Like, getting into a game is good. But the problem is, if the game limits you and it doesn't allow you to create interesting characters, if it doesn't allow you to create story moments that have tension, then it's a bad game. You know, this is why a lot of people still play 3.5. I mean, they use 5th edition in order to get into role-playing and understand how it works. But then if you actually want immersion, if you actually want to create an in-depth character and maybe min-max or have something more interesting, you either go with Pathfinder or you go with 3.5. And that's the main problem. You know, it's kind of sad. And I think 6th edition or 5.5 edition is just going to be more of the same. Probably worse from that aspect. And they're going to absolutely destroy all of their lore. You're not going to get interesting writing because they're not hiring interesting writers. They're hiring activists in order to fix racism in the United States. Some of them are furries, like openly furries, which is probably why they want to promote the concept of creating different races and stuff. And by the way, like all the races, I noticed this in Star Trek Picard as well. Like all the races are now bland. Like all the races are acting like humans, which completely defies the purpose of fantasy. The purpose of fantasy is that the races were stereotypes and they exaggerated certain human traits. Like, for example, the dwarves, they're very traditional, very stubborn. The elves, they love nature and stuff. And then having a party where you have a dwarf, an elf, and a orc working together, that creates an interesting story, an interesting roleplay dynamic. Lord of the Rings come to mind with Gimli and Legolas, which hate each other at the beginning, but to the end of the story, they're best friends. And that's why it works. That's why it's great. It's because of that dynamic. But you're not going to get moments. It's like, have you ever thought that you will die side by side with a dwarf? No, but how about a friend? I can do that. You're never going to get that moment again. Right? Like that's lost. Because if you get that moment, you go out and you do racismus, according to the developers. So, we'll see. I don't have high hopes for it. And definitely, it's going to be homebrewed to high heaven. Like, I don't think people are going to play the new colored goblins, because apparently that's a thing. Like, they want to change the color of goblins. People are still going to play with green goblins. But it's just one example. And the rules, you know, it's so bizarre. It's like, okay, so enemies can't crit. Like, why? Why can't enemies crit? I mean, like, you're taking away part of the randomness of battle. Like, the randomness of battle was a good thing, because battles should be dangerous. It should encourage people to also avoid combat. Like, that's also a strategy, but whatever. Let me know what you guys think, though, and I'll see you in the comment section. Take care.